Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am back, continuing on with my 60 Nights of Fright on JayMovieTalk. Yeah. So everyone that's been listening, especially for the last month or so, I kicked off 60 Nights of Fright in September, and here we are into October, continuing on with 60 Nights of Fright as I am doing. Excuse me. 60 Nights of Fright. I am continuing on, and we're doing Candyman from 1992. But before we get into that, last episode I did the Final Destination ranking and everything like that in that episode, which I had a lot of fun with, and I was glad that I actually got around to finally watching Bloodlines. Even though it is my least favorite of the franchise. And I mean, I kind of say that right now because of the fact that it is the newest one. And yes, I still do not like a lot of the I should say a lot. All of the main characters in the story, I did not like any of them. And I didn't feel one way or another about if they got, if they survived, if they got at some point. It really didn't bother me. I was more interested in the side characters. Well, I should say smaller characters like Iris, who is built up in the beginning as being like the main character, but then we jump like 40 something years, to current day basically, and everything. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with that episode. And I thank everyone who listened to that episode. Yeah, so now let's get to this week's topic of Candyman, which I mentioned at the end of last week's episode. Candyman from 1992. This is a movie that I have enjoyed a lot since I was a kid. It scared me half to death as a kid because of the whole you kind of taking a urban legend type thing and you're flipping it and making it be even more of an urban legend and giving it a twist with a lot of social commentary and even the psychological aspect of the movie. Because I think that's one of the things that makes this movie as good as it is. I mean, of course, the horror aspect of it, the social commentary definitely, but also the psychological thing. Because Helen in this movie goes through hell, basically, which is kind of ironic. Her name is Helen and she goes through hell in it. And everything. But I will say that this movie has had a very good legacy. We did get 2 direct sequels, and you got a reboot here a few years ago as well. And just how the movie and the character of Candyman helped influence, horror, in the 90s in a lot of ways, especially black horror films in the 90s. I feel like this movie helped a lot as far as giving us more of an influx of black horror in the 90s. And also, we get some gothic horror because even also too, this movie has some gothic-ish elements as well to it. So you could say that a lot of what Candyman does kind of helped elevate the black horror, in the 90s and beyond in a way, and everything. So this movie was directed by Bernard Rose. I don't believe I've seen anything else directed by Bernard Rose, and I didn't look it up before I got on here to record because I actually wanted to do this for the first time. My initial reaction to seeing what I might have seen of his before Candyman. And as I'm looking through his filmography, let's see, his first real feature film was in, let's see here, was this 1986, the year I was born. Smart Money. And no, I have not seen that. And okay. His next feature was in 87, Body Contact, haven't seen it. 88, Paper House, haven't seen it. And then he does a movie called Chicago Joe and the Showgirl, never seen it. Candyman in 92. He also did another movie, Inside Out 3 in 92. He does a couple of Inside Out movies. What the hell? What is that? What is this? Oh, God. In the mail. Wait, whoa, wait a minute. How did he follow up Candyman by directing some softcore porn? What? Wait a minute. Wait, okay, Mr. Rose, what you had going on? All right. 1994, he does Immortal Beloved. Stars Gary Oldman and Isabella Rossellini, but I never seen it. Let's see, he did an Anna Karina movie. As I'm kind of just looking through his filmography. Wait, which Frankenstein is this? What was this? He did a Frankenstein. Never seen it. But it was starring Carrie Ann Moss and Danny Huston. Let's see. And that was in 2015. The last movie, as of right now, that he has out is a movie that came out in 2021 called Traveling Light. But it says he has a couple of upcoming projects and don't look like anything I'll probably be interested in. So the only movie of his that I've actually seen is Candyman. Now, I've heard of Immortal Beloved, but I never seen it. So that's kind of interesting that this is, and I think for a lot of people, this is the only movie. I mean, I don't think it's the only movie that most movie buffs have ever seen, but I feel like it's the only one of his that is of note, outside of Immortal Beloved probably. But yeah, I think it was interesting. This was his, and why he didn't do more movies like this, because how do you go from directing Candyman to doing softcore porn on Playboy? Interesting. I don't know, maybe I have to look into how the hell did he follow that up like that. But anyway, this was based on a Clive Barker short story called The Forbidden, and the fact that they decided to switch the setting, because I believe in the short story, because I never read the short story, so but from what I gather here is in the short story, the story was set in Liverpool, but then for the movie it got flipped to, okay, we're going to Americanize it and we're going to set it in Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects, which it was a bold move, but I think that's what makes this movie feel so real, is because it's set in a real place, basically, and everything. But yeah, I always found it interesting how they came up with, okay, let's gonna set this in Chicago, in the projects at that, and yeah, we kind of went from there, in a way. I do like the fact that the movie does touch on a lot of social issues, especially of the time of 1992, and some of it is still very much relevant today. You're dealing with the housing project, so of course you're dealing with poverty. A lot of the people, they just, because you got like the gangs that pretty much run the Cabrini Green, and when Helen and Bernadette coming through, they do the whistles and everything, basically like, 5-0 coming through, type of thing. Of course, the racism, because of the fact that it's taking place in a black neighborhood, the police are not really concerned with a lot of the crime that goes on, whether it's from the actual gangs or if it's anything that's being done by the quote unquote urban legend of Candyman, and everything. And how, in a way, when you think about it, Helen kind of gets a pass for a lot of stuff that she does and is kind of framed by Candyman of doing, like with the whole thing of when she wakes up in Vanessa Williams' character's apartment and the dog head is chopped off, the meat cleaver is next to the dog, and she's losing it because she thinking her son is gone, and baby Anthony is gone, and she thinks he's dead. And the fact that Helen wakes up, now she's covered in blood, she sees the dog head on the floor, blood all over the place. why the hell did she pick up this meat cleaver? Like, what'd you think? Like, what'd you think was going to happen? You pick up this hatchet thing, and let me get my fingerprints all over it, basically. And then you open the door and you try to figure out, why is this woman crashing out on me and attacking me and asking you, where's my son? But what I feel like, if the roles were reversed, and if it was Vanessa Williams as the Helen character, she does this to Virginia Madsen's character, and when she flips her over, because she hacks her in the arm with the damn hatchet at that and everything, so she could get the upper hand, and she has the damn thing reared back like she's gonna hit her with. The police breaks the door in. They don't shoot her. And I'm like, if that was reversed, they would have shot the hell out of Vanessa Williams' character. And everything. But they don't. They just, and the dude, like, one of the cops, if you watch it, he has the shotgun like on her and everything. And it's just like, yeah, she was given a pass. It's like they don't outright say, oh yeah, you murdered somebody, even though we got you, we caught you red-handed, like literally red-handed, right? But instead of them, just locking her up, she needs psychiatric treatment, and we're going to give her the best care. It's like they're treating her, because she's a white woman, in a way. They're giving her more leniency, in a way. And the fact that, the story has probably swept through Chicago. It's probably a big story, right? And when we get to the point, because I'm not going to go through and do like a full review of Candyman or anything like that, but I will talk about different things from it. But like the part where she breaks out of the mental, hospital and everything, which is just like, again, if she looked a different type of way, I feel like she would not have gotten 10 feet out of that mental hospital without somebody recognizing her. But because it's just a white woman, she can just kind of blend in and maneuver her way out of there, right? And the fact that it's like there's no all-out manhunt, or at least they don't show it, there's no all-out manhunt for Helen or anything, because the doctor got murdered, and she may or may not have murdered that nurse that she kind of pulled a Jeff Hardy on when she come in through the window. But it's just like one of the things of where it's like she was given a lot of leeway, where I feel like if Bernadette was the main character, I don't think she would have been given the same leniency to a degree that what Helen was given from the police, and everything. And then it's that whole thing of like, here you have this white woman that's a fish out of water going into the hood. She's snooping around, and she effed around and found out, basically. Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a cautionary tale too. Like, going where you're not really supposed to be, you pretty much effed around and found out, and everything about the whole Candyman thing. And then also too, you get the sense of like everyone is afraid, because gentrification is slowly but surely becoming a thing in Chicago at this point. And that's one thing I liked about the reboot, of how that whole thing was a kind of a driving force also of that story. Gentrification had become, a reality, where in this movie it's like it's slowly getting the wheels going. So you have that whole fear of the urban decay, and it's like, yeah, the place is pretty much run down and everything like that, but we're slowly, basically, if we can get all of yous out of here and we can fix it up and make it, to where good people want to come and live and stay, type of thing. So like I say, a lot of that kind of helped make the story, feel even more authentic and very much real. I do want to talk about how the design for Candyman, I think, is probably one of the best. Even though like on paper it's kind of simple, because I mean, you have this tall guy, Tony Todd, who's like at least 6'4" or something like that, 6'4", 6'5" maybe. The late great Tony Todd, that is, and how he wears that, that kind of, I don't think it's wool. I don't know what exactly kind of coat that is, but it's that long, you know, like dark brown coat that he wears, and then that hook hand, and like because when the story is told about what happened to him and everything, and because in this movie we only hear about, I believe it's the sequel where they actually show, you know, him being hunted down, him being, you know, mutilated with his right hand being mutilated, and then them covering him in the bees, and that's how he becomes, you know, Candyman basically. And the fact that Tony Todd, who at this point he was a character actor, you know, he had been in some high profile movies, not really like a main character, because like the movies I knew of him, and you know, you kind of see of him earlier in his career is, you know, he has the part in Platoon where he's like one of the sergeants. He gets shot. He doesn't die, but he gets shot, so he gets taken out and everything. He has a small but memorable part in Colors where he's like the angry Vietnam vet, you know, yelling at them about like, this is our neighborhood and y'all shining the lights on us, and he kind of has his little crash out moment. And then, you know, he's also in Lean on Me as the, you know, as Joe Clark's head of security, and everything like that, right? So he had been in stuff. And then the year before, well, 2 years before, he is being in the remake of Night of the Living Dead. He plays Ben in that. So, which I always wondered. Now, hold on, because I gotta look to see, because I always forget exactly when that movie comes out and when this movie comes out, because yeah, it came out in 1990. This came out in 92, but it's almost like, in a way, there was a foreshadow of him playing Candyman, because his introduction in Night of the Living Dead, which I actually like his Ben's introduction a little bit better than Dwayne Jones' Ben introduction, because he pulls up in that pickup truck, he runs over a zombie, he gets out the car, and he has a crowbar, but it's the way it's framed is similar to how Candyman, you know, in that hook and everything. Then it's him puffing a, you know, cigarette or whatever, right? But him, I would say this: Tony Todd in this movie, he makes the movie that much more interesting and everything, because I would say one of the biggest things about this movie that I really enjoy is, like, for the first, I would say the first part of the movie, excluding the opener with Ted Raimi and this girl and the whole thing about Candyman, this, that, and the third. And when he appears in the mirror behind her for like a quick second, you don't see him again for a good, like, for the first half of the movie. You don't see him. So it's still, you don't know. Like, I'm talking about as a first time watcher, you don't really know if Candyman is real. And especially with what happens to Helen in that freaking bathroom when the doggone gang, you know, they come in and, oh, I'm the Candyman B, and he hit her in the eye with the freaking tire iron, basically, well, crowbar that he hit her with. No, it was a hook. He had some old rusty ass hook in his hand, and he was like, he the Candyman, and bopped in the eye, and then next thing you know, she looked like she had been in a fight with Mike Tyson or something. But up until she is, you know, she goes into that parking garage, which I feel like that's like one of the best like character introductions, because like I say, up until that point, you don't know that he's real, or anything. But that scene, and with her walking to her car and the whole Helen, it's just like, who is that? And everything. It's like, man, look, somebody called me with a voice sounding like that, I'll be thinking, oh Lord, the devil coming for me or something. But you know, just the way he appears, and then the way they frame it of him, you know, at the very end of that parking garage, and he's monologuing as he's walking towards her, and you still don't get a clear look of him until they finally give him that close up. And I feel like that is like one of the best ways of introducing a character and making him even more larger than life, because that first half of the movie is all about building up to when you finally get the visual of Candyman, and everything. And speaking of Virginia Madsen, I just want to talk about her performance in this, because as much as Tony Todd as Candyman, makes the movie, that more menacing. He's a imposing figure in the movie, and we get glimpses of him throughout the movie. I mean, we get to really see him more like in the latter half of the movie, but that first part of the movie is really Helen's movie. And you get to know her friend, her best friend Bernadette. They want to go to Cabrini Green to do this story about Candyman and everything, and some people trying to warn them, and some people it's like, oh, you doing that? Okay, well, yeah, good luck with that. And how she is treated, by the residents of Cabrini Green. Like I said, it's all building up her relationship with no good Xander Berkeley and everything. Like, we get all of this stuff about Helen in the first half of the movie, and I don't think the movie works without the performance that Virginia Madsen gives. And the thing that also helps this movie is the chemistry that she has with Tony Todd, because the scene, like, I go back to that parking garage scene, like the fact that she is in a trance and that tear that's coming down her eyes, it's like, I'm going to be late, and all that type of stuff. And just how they are together. And then later in the movie, when he is basically like enticing her, and then she kind of sort of embraces the enticement of him. And this is at the mental hospital, when that no good doctor is trying to talk to her and got her chained up in the chair, and then she calls out Candyman, and then he appears, and then he murders the doctor, and then he does the reverse fly through the window, which is still kind of, it's almost kind of funny. And I know there's been memes made about it and everything, but all in all, I think what makes this movie work the best is like those two performances, and when they're together is what helps make this movie even more larger than life. Because I feel like if they would have cast the wrong people as far as chemistry wise, I don't think Candyman works as well as it does without. It's like it was perfect casting. Tony Todd as Candyman, Virginia Madsen as Helen, and how they kind of work well together, because he is striking fear into everyone, and you're kind of going through everything with Helen, and you are also in fear of the fact that you basically F around and found out that Candyman is real. Now he's basically toying with you because he said, be my victim, type of thing. And how they pretty much play up a lot of the fear factor elements of like he's terrorizing people, but then you are afraid because think about it. When he has her in that trance, who knows how much time actually went by between her waking up in this woman's apartment with blood all over and the dog dead and baby Anthony being gone, and then you getting charged for something that you didn't do, and everything, right? And then, like I say, as things go on, where she's even shown like the recording of where she's tied to the bed in the room. Now she knows she saw Candyman and how he was talking to her, but when it shows back on the camera, it seems like she's just talking to herself and everything. And like I said, it just works perfectly with those two. So let's talk more about, like say, about urban legends and like folklore, because that's one of the things about this movie, especially that first half of the movie. It pretty much brings the modern day boogeyman. You hear stories about it, and it's like, I don't know about this. It's almost like how like Halloween, Michael Myers is the boogeyman. The whole thing about is the boogeyman is coming, and then comes to find out the boogeyman is real, right? Or like Nightmare on Elm Street, the urban legend. Well, I wouldn't say urban legend, but the fact that these parents, hide the fact that, they kind of, they banded together to do some vigilante justice against this, child murder, may or may not have been, doing other things with the kids. But uh, the fact that, they do this and try to keep it a secret, and then he comes back as a dream demon, knocking off all the kids who are children of, those characters and everything. And how they pretty much, you just kind of build up with those stories. So same thing here with Candyman, of how he's a modern day boogeyman and is steeped so much in the racial trauma because he was created because of racism. And I find it very interesting the fact that he terrorizes this black, projects in a way, which is kind of says a lot in a way, but I don't know why that has always kind of been interesting to me. You would have thought that he would have terrorized the people who look like the people who killed him, but instead he terrorizes the black people of this low income apartment housing project, right? Which has always kind of been interesting to me. But in a way, it kind of works because it's almost like, well, yeah, we got it bad, but let's not try to focus on that thing, and we don't say his name, because one of the biggest things about this movie is, if you take anything away from it, keep his name out your mouth and you'll be all right. For the most part, you will be all right. As long as you keep his name out your mouth, you're gonna be all right. And then the whole thing about, it's like the power of belief, like the fact that you could say his name into the mirror, but do you believe? And it's one of those things of where it's like, well, if I don't believe in it, then it's not real. Where it's interesting, like how certain characters, they kind of dance around Candyman in a way, because like the one professor with the long hair who shows back up in the sequel, and he get what he deserved in the sequel, by the way. How when Helen and Burnett are talking about, the whole, it's like, oh, you're doing Candyman. It's like, oh, well, you should read the paper I wrote about him a decade ago, blah, 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 type of thing. It's like he kind of brushes it off of, it's just some nonsensical fiction stuff, right? Some nonsensical fiction stuff. That it's just an urban, he don't really believe in it until it comes up and bites him in the behind in the second movie. But here is like he just kind of brushes it off. I don't think that Helen truly believed until he basically had to show her that he was real, because she was just thinking, oh, okay, this is a story. Like, I don't really believe, I don't have enough proof. I need more proof to know that he's real. And then he just pulled up on us like, be my victim, and everything. I don't think like a lot of the characters truly believe, or you have this few characters like the little kid who I think he believes, but he also respects Candyman. And I think that's one reason why Candyman probably never came for him, because it's like he respects and understands, he understands better than a lot of the adults understand. And I always liked that character, and I don't know why they didn't bring that character back for the reboot. I kind of thought that it was going to turn out that that's who Coleman Domingo character was, but they didn't go that route. But it'd been like, yeah, they should have brought that character back, since they brought Vanessa Williams back, and the fact that Yaha Mateen, he is playing baby Anthony all grown up. So it's like, why couldn't they bring that character back? But that's a whole nother story. And then also too, what Cabrini Green represented in 1992 and how it reflected a lot of what was going on in America at the time. Like, you had different things going on. I mean, Rodney King happens relatively close around this time. This is still a few years before O.J. Simpson trial. This is, I think, a few years also before Susan Smith with the whole, a black man stole my vehicle and drove it into this lake and killed my kids. And it turns out, no, you drove it into the lake and killed your freaking kids. And just like little things like that, of where how, it was representative of like a lot of what was going on at the time in America and everything. And it was very much prevalent. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like this movie a lot, because of a lot of social commentary, even though it hit the way it hits in 1992, but it's still very much relevant still to this day with a lot of the stuff, because we really haven't moved too far from 1992 America to today's America. I mean, it just kind of it might sound a little different, but as far as a lot of the social injustice and things of that nature, I mean, it's still very much there, and even more so on a microscope once you throw social media into it, and you can see a lot of more what's going on and everything, right? And just how race plays a big factor into this story. Also, the social classes play a different story, because Helen and Bernadette they're not from the projects. Hell, when they first come there, like I said, the gangs and everything, they think, oh, they cops, oh, they 5-0. So they're outsiders, and everything. They are looking at it as, oh, we can kind of come and play around in here, and, oh, this little murals and stuff, oh, that's cool or whatever. But it's like, y'all don't respect what you're looking for, or what you're witnessing. You don't have the same respect or fear of what you're looking for. So Candyman basically had to show him. Unfortunately, Bernadette gets gotten, but again, it's like he had to show them and to kind of force Helen to respect. But I don't even know if Helen, I think she does start to respect, but she also kind of gets lost in the sauce with Candyman, and they kind of go on a Bonnie and Clyde-ish type of thing until basically like, no, I need to find baby Anthony, and they have their whole thing at the end, and they both go up in flames basically, or whatever. But the backstory of Candyman, as I spoke about a little bit earlier, is a very sad, it's a tragic story, all because of the fact that he was an artist doing slavery time, and he falls in love with a white woman. So of course Dr. Umar would not be proud of that. But that's what happened, and instead of him just leaving and everything, he sticks around. They, hunt him down, and they basically make him, Candyman, make him this monster that is a tragic, cautionary urban legend, tale or whatever. One of the things too about the movie that I enjoy is how it mixes different aspects of the horror genre, because like I said, you have the slasher aspect of it. You also have the whole gothic horror elements of it, even though it's not set like in the South or anything like that, but it very much has that kind of gothic thing, because a lot of people who live in Chicago, like their people, like their family and everything, they are from the South. They migrated, so a lot of the traditions and things like of that nature, they travel with them, and they just kind of expanded on certain things. And that's why Chicago kind of has a certain flair and a certain sound musically and things like that. And how they kind of pretty much, added the whole real world dread to it. Because it is a somewhat somber story. It's one of those, let me go screwing around. Oops, I got caught up in something, and now I got to try to figure my way out of it. Do I survive or do I die? Type of thing. And which, I mean, when you think about it, when you look at a lot of the horror, and not just black horror, but a lot of the horror movies that were being made around the time, it was very rare to have people who look like me at the forefront, or put emphasis on it. I would probably say, like, between this, People on the Stairs, because again, a few years later, hell, even Demon Knight to a degree has some kind of underlying, when it comes to Jada Pinkett character, Geraldine, and then of course Tales from the Hood, and all that and everything. Bones, that would come along later in the 2000s with the social commentary and and that kind of plays a lot of the same themes of what Candyman gives, in a lot of ways. But in the early '90s, me personally, I would probably say like between this, People on the Stairs, those type of movie, those are the movies that I feel like helped influence that later '90s, you know, um, influx of black horror in a way, which I'm very much appreciative. And then it's ironic because of the fact that Cassie Lemons, who plays Bernadette in this movie, she goes on to direct East Bayou, which is a Southern Gothic horror film, in a way, and everything. So let's talk about Mr. Tony Todd, R.I.P. I did speak about him quite a bit in the last episode pertaining to the Final Destination franchise and how he played a big part of that franchise. He was like, next to the character of Death, he is the, overall constant of that story, and how he was allowed to say his farewell to his fans, in character, but still say farewell to his fans. I thought that was a very good, touching gesture, by the filmmakers and everything. But here, like I say, and I tell anybody this, Tony Todd was when I say our, I'm talking about black people. He was our first, black horror icon when you think about it. And when I'm talking about icon, I'm talking about like the iconic characters, the Jasons, the Freddys, the Michael Myers, the Leatherfaces, the Jigsaws, all those type of characters. He is still to this day relatively the one. He is our one. And I, like I say, I think he does a fantastic job playing the character. I don't think anybody else truly could do what Tony Todd did with the character. I mean, from the subtle movement and the fact that he was a large man, it made him even more larger than life with how they framed him and how he looks throughout the movies and everything. And to some degree, I feel like even though it is a iconic character, it's also somewhat, I feel like it's underrated overall as a character, which is kind of weird because I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know who the character of Candyman is. Even if they've never seen the movie, they know who Candyman is. And like it was talked about in the documentary Horror Noir, like if he nails Candyman, he'll be Candyman forever. And he kind of really was. Even though Tony Todd had a whole career before and after Candyman. After Candyman came out, anytime people saw, oh, that's Candyman. Like, they didn't even know his name. Oh, a lot of time, but they knew who Candyman was. And then also too, like how he comes along at a time where you already have what I call the Mount Rushmore of the horror icons. You have your Jasons, you have your Freddys, you have your Michael Myers, you have your Leatherface, you have your Chucky. You have Leprechaun who comes along relatively around this time and everything. But here you have Candyman, who of all of them might be the most tragic character. I think Jason probably would be maybe number 2, if we kind of going down that, because Jason was a handicapped child and then he became this monster, right? So I would say that he's probably second, but the fact that Candyman was just an artist who just fell in love with a white woman, and next thing you know, he had to end up getting his hand chopped off and smothered in honey, and bees come and stung the hell out of him, type of thing. So that's some tragic, cold stuff when you think about it. But in all seriousness, I mean, Tony Todd is on the level. He's right up there with those, if not even better than some of those characters, to a degree. Also, I almost forgot about, how can you forget about the priest himself, Pinhead, right? And everything, played by Doug Bradley. He's another kind of somewhat tragic character. Ironically, another one of Clive Barker's creations when you think about it. And just how, like I say, Tony Todd does a fantastic job playing the character, and you feel sympathy for him, even though he's around here grunting and ripping people from asshole to appetite, basically. But you still feel sympathy, like dealing with the character and why he is the way he is, and you kind of find yourself having some sympathy for him. But then also too, you like, yeah, this man is, yeah, cold blooded when you think about it. So it's like you kind of go through all of these emotions and feelings when watching the character, because on one hand, yes, he is a murderer and everything, but then also at the same time, you feel sad for how he became Candyman and everything. So one thing that Candyman does, and I've talked a little bit about it, is how the social commentary plays throughout the movie. And some of it here is subtle, and some of it is kind of right in your face. So, and like I say, I don't think we get movies like Get Out, like Us, His House, movies like that. I don't think we get movies like that without a Candyman, and everything that can play, up the whole social commentary as well as telling a very good horror story. I don't think we get those movies without the success of what Candyman was, and how, it's always been, horror has always been for me, I feel like horror has always been that one genre where if you want to sneak in social issues, social commentary about different things, the horror genre has always been that genre that allows it. And you can do a lot with horror, where unlike a lot of the other genres, where horror I feel like is the one genre that could literally be every other genre. It can be a period piece, it could be a action movie, it could be a drama, it could be a comedy, hell, it could be a musical. You could literally you could say anything is a horror and then make it be any one of those other categories. And that, where unlike any other, horror is, for me, is my favorite genre, and why, you can do so many different things within the genre. And the fact that you can, like I say, you can sprinkle in your social commentary throughout horror movies. And sometimes people, they do it subtly, and sometimes they do it very heavy-handedly. Either way, it is very effective with how they kind of do that, and how, how a lot of times the horror genre, it explores the fear of, identity, of culture in a lot of aspects, which this movie does kind of, lean into that in some ways. The identity, like, who exactly am I? Who is Candyman? Who is, who are the people of Cabrini Green and everything? And then, of course, the culture. I mean, of course, you got the early 90s hip hop kind of, influx of things, and just how everyone is kind of moving a certain type of way. It's very much played out throughout this movie, but also in horror with social commentary. You also kind of see a lot of what might have been prevalent at the times, like how people dress, how people talk, certain things, the whole tropes of, never have sex, premarital sex, you never say I'll be right back, and little things like that. Or basically the whole running thing of like the Friday 13th is, well, if you have sex, you're gonna die. If you smoke weed, you're gonna die. If you're not paying attention, you're gonna die, right? So it is very much the genre where you can do a lot within said genre. So I can't get out of here without talking a little bit about Philip Glass's score for this movie. It's probably some of the best like musical score for a horror film. I put it very much up there on the same level of what John Carpenter would do with his films. Like, it's nothing like overly over the top. It's very much simple, but it's very effective, and it also sets the tone for what you're in store to watch, because that, as the movie comes on and it's sweeping, that aerial shot of sweeping across Chicago, and how the music, it builds up, and it's like that's pretty much what you get when you watch Candyman. It's a lot of build up to, the reveal of Candyman, and then he takes you on this crazy journey and everything, and it very much sets the mood. And in a lot of ways, it also kind of has like the little sad-ish, like little melody to it also. Yeah. So like I say, him and Carpenter, I feel like they very much understand the assignment. They very much understood the assignment when it comes to like the music and how it plays. It in itself is very much a character, in a lot of ways. And then, as I talked about earlier too, like how Candyman's influence over the early 2000s, because around that time is when you did kind of start to get more black horror films. As I spoke about, I don't think Bones get made, which in a way he shares some characteristic traits of Candyman. Thinking about Jimmy Bones was a pimp from the 70s who he wanted to take care of his community, but then you had the outsiders because drugs was the new wave and everything. They take him out, but by them murdering Jimmy Bones, he comes back as something otherworldly as well, similar to very much like Candyman. Surprised they never did more Bones movies. I would have liked to have seen like maybe one or two more Bones movies, especially with how the Bones movie ends and everything. And then like how in with Jordan Peele Get Out, and how that became such a phenomenon and got off to the races. And then the fact that Jordan Peele decided like, hey, my production company, we're going to push out a reboot of Candyman. And I thought that Neil DeCosta did an excellent job directing that movie. I know the movie somewhat kind of gets mixed reviews or whatever, but I thought it was a good companion piece to this movie. And you can somewhat watch them back to back. You can, and everything, because the sequel, it does have it adds a lot of stuff to the story, following the events of the first original movie and everything. And I feel like one of the things that kind of sets it apart, I feel like I already said this, but I'll say it again. Like one of the things that set this movie apart from the big, quote unquote big horror films, what sets it apart is the whole thing of, well, Candyman, because of the fact that he pretty much like I said, he was an artist, so he carried himself a certain way. So he has this kind of regal, way about him and everything. And then also, like I said, it's a tragic story. Candyman's story is tragic, but then also too the whole thing with Helen is a tragic story, and how she basically sacrificed herself to save baby Anthony. And then like in the sequel, how in a way Helen somewhat becomes part of the urban legend also in everything. And then then again, like looking at how the black characters are treated versus how the white characters are treated in Candyman, but also in Hollow, like a lot of other horror movies. Like you see how we're portrayed in a lot of ways. Because I know a lot of people have issue with Halloween Resurrection, but it's a so bad it's good movie, okay? And I always look at the character of Freddy, played by Busta Rhymes, and how he was doing, streaming or whatever before it became a thing. Because when you look at Halloween Resurrection, that's basically what they're doing. They literally, they got these cameras, they streaming on the internet and all this type of stuff. It's like, well, damn, this movie was basically like a decade and a half ahead of its time when it comes to that. Because imagine if that movie came out now, and with the whole same thing of, hey, we're gonna have these people going around this kind of haunted urban legend house and everything like that. I mean, I think it would do better now than it did back then, because of what they were doing and how a lot of people, they think about TikTok, they think about Twitch, YouTube and all that type of stuff, as far as streaming wise go. And that's what you got a lot in that movie. Whereas here you get a lot of, how, signs of the times pretty much, like, and how everything pretty much tied together and all that good stuff. And why it's still relevant, as much ever today is a large part because of the racial undertones, gentrification, and all that type of stuff. Candyman still is still telling a story all these years later, and it's always cool when people go back and revisit it, or if they even see it for the first time, and how they can interpret certain things to a lot of what's going on right now and everything. So before I get up out of here, I do have a question, as I do in all these episodes. What do you think do you think Candyman is a tragic figure, or is he a true villain? I'm asking that on this episode. So if you're watching on YouTube, definitely you can comment down below. But also, I'm going to put this over on Threads, and by the time I do the next episode, the poll should be done and everything like that. And I will let you guys know the answer to that. But for me, I feel like he's a tragic figure. That's just me. He's a tragic figure who unfortunately now is trapped in the whole thing of terrorizing people, or whatever. But he is a very much of a tragic figure, and everything. So before I get out of here, I do want to say what I will be doing for the next episode. As I sat here and I talked about Candyman, and everything. But for the next episode, I will be doing a horror character spotlight. I'll be talking about one Miss Laurie Strode, as well as talking about other final girls. So basically, it's going to be Laurie Strode / final girls of horror, and everything. Kind of similar to what I did when I did the 2-part episode about actresses from the 90s. So I don't know if maybe this might get 2, maybe 3 parts out of it. I don't know yet, but that's what I'll be doing for the next episode, talking about Laurie Strode, the character of Laurie Strode, as well as talking about other final girls. So basically, it's going to be Laurie Strode / final girls of horror, and everything. Kind of similar to what I did when I did the 2-part episode about actresses from the 90s. So I don't know if maybe this might get 2, maybe 3 parts out of it. I don't know yet, but that's what I'll be doing for the next episode, talking about Laurie Strode, the character of Laurie Strode, as well as some of my favorite final girls in horror and everything. So that will be the next episode. So definitely look forward to hear me talk about that. As far as Candyman, like I said, I didn't want to do a through and through review. I just want to talk about certain aspects of the movie, how very much it's still a very relevant movie, and how it continues to have such a long lasting legacy, in large part because of Tony Todd and what he did with this character. I don't think any other actor for the most part could have done what he's done with that character. And I don't think there will be anyone to fill his shoes if they ever decide to do another Candyman. I don't think we would get anyone who would give the same effort or make you feel whether, for him as a tragic figure, and everything. And like I say, it's just how this movie gives, it has a perfect blend of horror and also heartbreak, because it's a lot of heartbreak, because you actually feel bad for Helen when, after she breaks out the mental hospital, she goes back to her apartment thinking that, I think Xander Berkeley character, I think his name is Tim. And, you expect her, to find him there, and he's pretty much should be kind of like down bad or whatever, because the love of his life is supposed to be, going away for supposed murder and kidnapping, right? But when she gets home, which this was pretty much kind of foreshadowed early in the movie, where Tim was pretty much fumbling around with this other young girl and everything. And when Helen gets there and like the girl, she gets scared real quick, but it's like, man, you up in where I live. Like I haven't been gone that long, and this how you do me? Like, damn, you done already moved on. Y'all in here painting and everything. Y'all living a good life up in here and everything. And just that whole scene of how it plays out and how Helen feels betrayed by the one person she thought was gonna always be in her corner. But it's like Kendrick said, you can't please everybody, you can't trust everybody either. Well, to paraphrase what Kendrick said, and everything. But yeah, I mean, this movie is filled with, I mean, the horror aspect is one of the biggest things, but also it's like there's heartbreak because Helen becomes a tragic story of where, one, she should have been playing around with something she didn't fully understand and everything. But it's like once she fully goes down the rabbit hole, it's like, yeah, what's at the end of that tunnel is not a happy ending, and that's exactly what happens. She ends up sacrificing herself to save baby Anthony, and everything. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Of course, you can find me all over social media. Yes, I'm still over on the Twitter machine, or whatever, at the J Giles. Also over on Instagram, you can either follow my personal page, the J Giles over there, or the movie page, JMT Podcast. Of course, I'm also where I primarily am, like where you can find me the most, is over on Threads and everything, and it's the J Giles also. If you're listening on YouTube, or if you listen, you want to check out, you want to support the YouTube channel, JayMovieTalk over on YouTube, be sure to comment, like, share, subscribe, get active in the community, because I do post questions and things like that over there as well. Because again, I am pushing the YouTube. Follow me on YouTube. I'm going to say that every episode going forward. Follow me on YouTube. You get the full length episodes. You also get shorts. I should be pumping out some new content over there as well. Some B-sides should be coming out soon, and everything. So yeah, definitely follow me on YouTube. If you listen through TV Zone Podcast Network, you can find wherever you pretty much listen to your podcast, just type in TV Zone Podcast Network, and you can find all of the Movie Talk episodes, a part of the TV Zone Podcast Network, along with the Grand Slam podcast, the 3 and Out podcast, for photo podcasts as well over there, and everything. Also, if you listen on Apple Podcasts or whatever, be sure to give us 5-star rating so that we can be seen and heard by more people all over and everything, because have some really great shows a part of this network. I appreciate everyone who listens to Movie Talk, but definitely if you want to check out the sports shows hosted by Chris, Moneymaker Chris, and everything, the Grand Slam podcast, which I am a co-host of, and then he does this 3 and Out podcast, the football show, and then Chantel and Christian with the Frodo podcast, where they do movies and actors, directors spotlights and everything like that. So yeah, like I said, we have some really good people part of the network as well. As for me, like I said, this is episode 355. I will be back for episode 356 to talk about Laurie Strode and some of my favorite final girls and everything like that. And I will catch you guys next time. Peace.